Hello and welcome to Capitol Hill. I'm Lyndall Curtis. Almost a year ago, around 90 lives were lost as a boat carrying, it is thought, about 200 people travelling to Australia capsized. A week later, the Parliament held an extraordinary and emotional debate about asylum seekers amidst news of another search and rescue underway. 10 months ago, the expert panel on asylum seekers reported. A year later, despite all those words and changes in policy, another 55 lives have been lost at sea. A search that was called off last night has found only debris and bodies from a boat sighted stationary but upright, with adult men and some women and children on deck on Wednesday. No attempts to recover the bodies are being made today. There may be attempts in coming days if operations permit, but Border Protection Command says that the likelihood that can be done successfully diminishes over time. Joining me this evening are Liberal MP Andrew Southcott and Labor MP Rob Mitchell. Welcome to you both.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Lyndall.
The United Nations High Commission for Refugees expressed its deep concern about the loss of life at sea and urged countries to redouble efforts to find effective and humane regional solutions. The Immigration Minister, Brendan O'Connor, on Channel 7 this morning was urging one bilateral agreement be back on the table.
It's one of those real difficult issues when you've got conflicts around the world, displacement, you'll see this happen. But that's why I think that's why it's really important that we focus back on the experts' recommendations. Towbacks are too dangerous, flybacks to Malaysia's on the table. I think we've got to take it up.
Rob, Brendan O'Connor says you have to take up the Malaysia agreement, but there was a long list of protections the expert panel said were needed, particularly to satisfy the High Court that the Malaysian agreement was a fit one. That hasn't been done yet, has it?
The work's been going on to go through the Houston panel report that we put through last year. That had 25 recommendations, which had basically three stages. Your first stage was the offshore processing. The second was to get the Malaysian agreement in place. And the UNHCR said that they understood what we were doing with that. And they normally don't like to involve countries that aren't signatory, but they did understand that. And the third is to get the regional solution, which is what we've said all along, that this is not just Australia's problem. This is a problem that is a global issue, and in our region, we need to be the leaders and take the leadership to get a solution for the entire region, for all the small countries and other countries around us. And you know, it was a terrible night when the Houston report recommendations were pretty much knocked off by the coalition, and that's where we've seen, you know, the events leading up that we've had over the last 12 months.
Andrew, the expert panel also considered towing or turning the boats around, which is part of your policy, said it needed to meet legal, safety and diplomatic conditions, and it needed proper regional and bilateral agreements with Indonesia. The circumstances now are very different to the early year 2000s when turning back the boats was last done, aren't they? There would be more agreements with Indonesia needed, wouldn't they? Wouldn't there be if you were to pursue your policy?
Well, that is just one element of our policy. We've said what is required is offshore processing, the reintroduction of temporary protection visas and turning around boats where it is safe and practical to do so. Now, as you mentioned, this was done in 2001. It was a successful part of our policy, which did actually stop the boats at that time.
But as I mentioned, the circumstances are very different 12 years on, aren't they? You're not now got the impetus from either the post-9/11 period or the Bali bombings in Indonesia, so there would need to be some work to be done, wouldn't there, in order to get Indonesia to agree to that?
Well, having regional agreement is important. We did have that with the Bali process in 2001, 2002. But obviously what is being done at the moment is not working. We have an unprecedented level of boats arriving, unprecedented numbers of people now in immigration detention, and that's why we've put forward those three solutions to stop the boats.
Rob, do you think that the work that is being done to get regional agreement, to get countries like Indonesia which people transit through on their way to Australia to help stop asylum seekers getting on boats? Has enough been done?
No, there's always more to be done, and we're continuing to do that work. But I'd like to just pick up on what Andrew just said. Let's go back and look at that policy. 4 boats were turned around, 4 and 4 only. 2 of those, RAN officials, Defence Force officials, had to get on board and refix those boats. But what does turn the boats around? Turn the boats around means that the Navy has to go out, and they've already said they don't want to do this, go out into the ocean for a boat full of women and children, pick them up, tow them back to international waters, take their supplies off them, so they've only got enough to get back to Indonesia, and away you go. Last week we heard the opposition, you know, coming out with their 3-word slogan, oh, we will stop the boats, which is now to, we'll try and stop the boats. They're backing away from it. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition came out and basically accused the Indonesian ambassador of being a liar to the Australian public about what's going on. But when you drill into the details, turn the boats back doesn't work, and that's why the Houston report claimed that very clearly. Without the support of other countries, you cannot do this. You cannot go out in open waters, pick up a boatload of women and children and push them back out into the sea and let them go and hope for the best.
But Rob, most of the recommendations of the expert panel have been implemented, and yet none of them seem to have had the effect that you wanted.
Look, there's a whole range of reasons why people seek asylum. I mean, at the moment we're looking at crisis in Syria, where 7 million people, that's only 1/3 of Australia's population, is seeking asylum because of that issue. Now, around the world there are lots and lots of people seeking asylum for a whole range of things, whether it's religious, whether it's personal, persecution, and we've got to be mindful of that, and that's why we've got to go and we do the peacekeeping forces, and we have these things in other countries so that we can settle wars down and keep people in the areas that they're accustomed to. But it's an issue that faces the entire world. There are countries that receive 60,000 asylum seekers a month. I mean, that is huge compared to the numbers that we have. We've got to do more to make sure that we can help asylum seekers wherever they are, and we have to make sure that we work within the UNHCR framework that we signed up to.
Andrew, do you believe that should a coalition win government, that the solution is as simple as your side suggests, that the reintroduction of temporary protection visas, a policy to turn back the boats, will end the flow of boats, or is there actually more complex regional agreements that need to be entered into, and a more complex situation behind that causing people to flee their home countries?
And re-establishment of offshore processing as well. That's the third element. Well, I think we've got to try. I mean, we've now reached an unprecedented situation. Border Protection Command are under unprecedented pressure. This is now, I understand today, there is now a 4th boat requiring rescue in the area around Christmas Island. We think that these measures will work. They worked before. They were very successful. The boats stopped. When we left government in 2007, there was only 4 people in detention, and now we've got over 20,000 in detention.
We might move on now. With only 2 weeks of Parliament left before the scheduled election date of September the 14th, the leadership question on the Labor side is under discussion again. Senior MPs close to the Prime Minister say there's nothing afoot, although others believe pressure is being applied to Bill Shorten. He says he supports Julia Gillard. Rob, is the Labor Party looking at the prospect of an electoral wipeout? Are you concerned about your own seat?
No. These reports that seem to pop up every day now, we've had Bill's come out and said that his views are not changing. No one else's views are changing. There just seems to be a lot of speculation. I put out to people, well, okay, if we've heard all these things that, there's going to be a challenge this week, a challenge next week, whatever, start putting the name of the sources out there. Make people be held accountable for these sorts of things, because all it is just a distraction. It's time consuming, and it's not allowing us to keep talking about the good things that we have done in government, such as the NDIS, such as the education reforms, our aged care packages, all the things that actually are important. I know I've had lots of journos ring me today and ask me. There's just nothing there, and I think that this sort of speculation comes off wild reports. I mean, last week Christopher Pyne, was on the 7:30 report last Thursday making outrageous claims, all which proved to be a lie, all which proved to be false. And I think it's time that we started saying, well, you know what, we keep hearing these things, it's not happening, move on and focus on the policies. And that's where you'll see a clear difference between us and our plan for the future and Tony Abbott, who's delivering nothing.
If I could ask you a question about your own seat.
Yep.
It is one that has changed hands between elections. Are you facing an uphill battle in your own seat, or are you confident of victory?
Well, if I look at the 400 homes that we door-knocked yesterday, we had overwhelming support. And I recall back in the 2010 election campaign, the polls had me not winning McEwen at all. In fact, they had me down 4 or 5%. We ended up winning by 5% and went against the flow of everything that happened nationally. I mean, I was one of only 2 seats that Labor won at the last election. And that showed that, being out there and working with the community and talking to them about the issues that matter to them is far more important than playing speculation games anywhere else. So at the end of the day, a poll comes, a poll goes, but it's election day that matters, and that's all that really does matter in this.
Andrew, on the coalition side of politics, can you afford to sit back and watch whatever happens in the Labor Party, if it's going to happen, play out? Or do you actually have to get on the front foot and start putting out some more of your own policies to build confidence in the electorate about what your plans are should you win government?
We've already been doing that. We've put out our plan, which has a lot of detail in it, which is going out all around Australia. But I find this quite extraordinary. There's 96 days to go to the election on the Prime Minister's own timetable, and Labor are unable to say who will be leading them into the election. This issue of the leadership, it flared up. It was supposedly settled in 2010. It was supposedly settled in 2012. It was supposedly settled only in March. And now, just over 2 months later, and unfortunately I think Rob is in denial. It does look like very clearly discipline has broken down in the Labor Party.
But if
you have people as experienced as Barry Cassidy saying
this, Andrew.
that,
if you want to play with your speculation games, it's not Labor people coming out talking about this. This is questions being asked to us. Well, who are they? Name them. You name one person.
As experienced a journalist as Barry Cassidy on Sunday said, he does not believe that Julia Gillard will be leading Labor Party to the election.
How many times have we heard? How many times have we heard this over the last 12 months, and nothing's eventuated?
And that's
the key to it.
That's where we might have to leave it. Rob Mitchell and Andrew Southcott, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Lyndall.
Andrew.
And thank you for joining Capitol Hill. Please be with us at the same time tomorrow. Good night.